I don't know about you, but I'm getting pretty tired about hearing all this gloom and doom about the Austin housing market. Some have been predicting a major crash for the last 2 years now. Now we know there are a lot of uncertainties, but I think if you take a minute and think about how we got here and ask yourself some basic questions about how any buyer-seller transaction takes place, you're going to be in a much better position to understand where we're at now and have a much more reasonable outlook about what we can expect in the future. Try, just for the length of this video, to suspend some of your preconceptions, because I want to look at this a number of different ways and try to understand exactly what's going on in the Austin housing market. Before we get into this, let's imagine that we could be transported back to November of 2020, but we know everything that we know now. We were still wearing masks, but we were only 6 months removed from those major lockdowns that pushed the economy into a recession. Also remember that prior to the pandemic, we'd been in the longest stretch of continuous economic growth in U.S. history. And during that time, Austin was the fastest growing metro in the entire country. We had seen an inbound migration of new residents in a 30 to 40,000 range for almost 10 years. We'd also seen pretty steady year-over-year home value appreciation at 5 to 6% range, which is very good, especially if you consider that was consistent year over year. Anyway, it's November of 2020, and we know what's coming. In 2021, we know that the number of people moving here is going to double. We're going to go from 40,000 a year to 80. And the ones who are going to be moving here are going to have about double the buying power of the ones who are already here. They're going to have higher incomes and more cash available to work with. And there's going to be a huge influx of investors because they're reading stories about how Austin is the new tech mecca. We know that in about 6 months, every builder in the entire metro is going to be sold out. And they're going to implement a bidding process where whoever is willing to pay the most for their new releases is going to be awarded the opportunity to sign the contract. And every resale home is going to sell almost immediately for substantially more than the list price. So as we sit there in November of 2020 and we know what's coming, if you're thinking about selling your house, you're probably going to want to wait, because if you do, we know that you're going to get at least 30 to 40% more. But if you're thinking about buying and you decide to wait, you may never get a house, because you're probably going to be outbid a number of times and may eventually be priced completely out of the market. Now, since we're actually in November of 2023, we know that all that craziness only lasted about a year, because in early 2022, the interest rates started going up and the housing market slowed considerably. Take a look at this chart. Between January 2022 and now, which is less than 2 years, interest rates went from 3.25% to 8%, which is a 246% increase. The next closest percentage increase was between 1978 and 1981, when rates doubled from 9 to 18. That's a 200% increase, but it took 4 years, which is twice as long as the recent rate increases. And all those YouTube gurus out there who have been telling you that those rapid rate increases are going to cause a recession or a housing crash have been wrong time and time again. In fact, in Q3 of this year, the GDP grew at 4.9%, which is the best it's been in 2 years. So I think it's safe to say that the economy is a lot stronger than some of these experts have led you to believe. But in spite of all this, we cannot deny that the rapid price increases, immediately followed by those rapid interest rate increases, have pretty much caused a stalemate. Many sellers are reluctant to reduce the list price of their house because they still think they're going to get the same kind of money as when all those buyers were aggressively bidding against each other. And all those buyers who have seen their buying power decrease by 30 to 40% either can no longer afford to pay the higher prices, or they refuse to pay them because they're convinced that we're going to see this housing collapse that all these gloom and doom gurus have been predicting. You know, I make these videos to provide information so that you can make better decisions when you're buying or selling real estate. But the only way I'll know if you like them, if you find them useful, is if you like the video, leave a comment, or subscribe to my channel. Also, if you're thinking about buying or selling real estate here in the Austin area, I would love to help you out. Shoot me a text or an email, or schedule a phone call on the YouTube channel page. But enough about that. If we're really going to understand the Austin housing market, then we need to understand that a perception of value is just that. It's a perception. It doesn't matter if it's the buyer, the seller, the lender, or the appraiser. Whatever value someone attaches to a house is only as accurate as what a buyer and a seller are willing to agree to. Let me give you an example. If you owned a house that you thought was worth $500,000 and a buyer offered you $8,000, you probably wouldn't argue with them. And when that house sold for $800,000, everybody on the same street, in fact, everybody in the neighborhood, is going to automatically think that their house is magically worth $800,000 too. Now, if one of those other owners were to put their house in the market for $800,000 and a buyer offered them $500,000, they would be offended, wouldn't they? They would point to that previous sale and say that that house sold for $800,000, so that means my house is worth at least $800,000. But what would happen if that seller had to sell? They were truly motivated. There was a divorce, a job change, or maybe it was an estate sale and all the beneficiaries wanted to sell the house as quickly as possible so they could get their money. After some time, when that house didn't sell, they might eventually come to terms with the reality of the market and accept that $500,000 offer. But once that house sells for $500,000, all the neighbors are going to point to it and call it an exception. That sale has nothing to do with the value of my house because my house is more like the one that sold for $800,000. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree with this example, one thing is 100% certain. The market is going to move with or without you, and the market is going to move no matter what you think it should do. A recent report from the Texas Realtors showed that the median price in the Austin Metro declined to $456,000 in the third quarter this year, and the median price in Dallas was $400,000. In 2021, that gap was $150,000. So whether you're willing to accept it or not, home prices in Austin are adjusting more in line to other metros in Texas. Now, if you're a seller in today's market, you really need to consider this when you're pricing your home. Unless you're okay with it sitting unsold for months with no showings and no offers. Based on current listings in the MLS, if a buyer is looking for a house in that $400,000 to $500,000 price range, they have about 3 to 4 months of inventory to choose from, which means they have a lot more options, including new construction. And any qualified buyer is always going to choose the best value. So you might want to ask yourself, how does your house compare to all the other houses out there that that same buyer could buy? Now, if you're on the high end of the price spectrum, there's even more competition. When you move up to $2 to $3 million and higher, that buyer has 8 to 9 months of inventory to choose from. Another way to say that is not all of those houses are going to sell for what that seller thinks the house is worth. Now, if you're a buyer and you can still qualify to buy in the area that you're most interested in, you're in a position to consider a lot more variables than you could before. Things like new versus resales, school districts, commute time. All these things are going to play a much greater role in determining your perception of value. Now, on the other hand, if the combination of high home prices and high interest rates have priced you out of certain areas, I have some advice for you, but you're probably not going to like it. All you have to do is get in your car and pick a direction. North, south, east, west, it doesn't matter. And just drive until you qualify. Now, if you want to learn more about what we can expect with home prices and mortgage rates, you might want to check out this video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell. That way you'll get a notification every time I post a new video.